All of this, Malthus, World War I, League of Nations, World War II, United Nations, atomic bomb, hydrogen bomb, Iron Mountain, Club of Rome, Vancouver Declaration, and Brundtland Commission are the stepping stones to Agenda 21, the action plan for sustainable development.
In 1992, in June, George H.W. Bush signed or agreed to the United Nations Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Plan.
It was a bad night in Rio. Before the ink had dried on Agenda 21, Bush 1 had signed the document.
It was not a treaty, it was not a law, it was what they call soft law. It's not something that actually is debated by Congress or by state legislatures, but it's implemented through the federal branches, through the HUD and EPA and OSHA, and also through state governments and county governments. If you brought back a treaty, the Senate would have voted on it, it would have been debated, there would have been information about it, and I would think it would have been voted down.
It was also a bad night for the United States, because on that night, in the year 1992, we the people were enjoined with what would become the largest land grab in history.
There were 50,000 delegates there, and of those 50,000 delegates in Rio de Janeiro, there were 179 heads of state, including George H.W. Bush, and plus diplomats and UN executives and so forth, and this massive number of non-governmental organizations that wrote these documents in the first place.
They designed Agenda 21 to be a, quote, voluntary agreement, not a treaty. So it didn't have to go before Congress, it didn't have to go anywhere, it just got done by President Bush's signature. What happened when he signed it was it mobilized every federal agency to adopt plans, programs, and mass amounts of money to the implementation of Agenda 21 on a local basis.
Zoning laws of every imaginable type on every level of government would soon be marching across rural and suburban America in the name of sustainable development.
And this was a bad night, because what he was signing on to and saying, hey, this is a great idea, he was completely going against the Constitution of the United States, the freedoms that it was designed to protect, private property, free enterprise, individual choice. George Washington would have whacked him in the head.
Then, in 1993, non-binding Agenda 21 became binding when Bill Clinton signed Executive Order 12852, launching the President's Council of Sustainable Development.
And it was tasked with implementing all of the plan within the United States. So although you'll hear that this is a dusty plan that's not really, it's voluntary, it's non-binding. In fact, this plan is binding on you.
They said, oh, this is just voluntary. If a community wants to follow some of these guidelines, well, that's up to them. They can just do that. On this council were every single agency of the federal government, pretty much, representatives of NGO organizations, the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, the Audubon Society, groups like this that helped write Agenda 21 at the UN level, and representatives of global corporations. They all came together in this council for one specific purpose: to take the ideas, the voluntary suggestions of Agenda 21, and make them law of the land. So when this happened, this argument that, oh, it's just a suggestion, went out the window. And what they did, the NGOs that wrote Agenda 21 in the first place, wrote the grant programs for HUD, for EPA, Department of Transportation, and they put in those grants small print that said, you take this grant, you will have to do this and this and this, which was the implementation of Agenda 21.
Like a cancer, Agenda 21 started embedding itself into every cell of the federal government and on down to the state governments.
That was in 1993, and that directed every federal cabinet officer to have a program for the implementation of Agenda 21.
Between 1993 and 1999, as Americans slept, sustainable development concepts and laws infiltrated every county, township, and city as federal and state grants, more realistically bribes, flowed with abandon.
Sustainable development interjected itself into states and localities through the use of monetary bribes, to be quite blunt. If these localities wanted to obtain money for certain projects, they had to sign on to projects that had sustainable development aspects to them. Somebody's brother-in-law made money in putting in that extra layer of asphalt and paint and so forth and so on. And that was the reason it's there.
And how they've actually gotten it to our local cities is through these carrots, the stick and carrot of giving federal highway safety transportation funds, as an example, to implement areas of sustainable development.
And that is pursued through 4 presidents, to include Donald Trump, to today.
Then, in 2015, after the UN enumerated 8 major goals for sustainable development at the 2000 Millennium Summit, Agenda 21 was officially updated to Agenda 2030.
Ban Ki-moon. The 70th session of the General Assembly has opened with a towering achievement. The adoption of the 2030 Agenda, including 17 inspiring Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Our
Agenda
aim is
2030
clear.
now specifies 17 major goals for the world to reach by the year 2030. The long march through rural and suburban America continued.
And so, of course, this is a devastating thing to the United States and to other nations that value freedom and their individual rights, because this plan is completely antithetical to the concept of individual freedom.
Now, in 2019, we have the Green New Deal breaking out in the public domain for the first time, openly pushing the goals of both Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030.
When we have this threat that challenges all of us, the solution is going to take all of us too.
Everywhere you go across the United States, you find evidence of sustainable development. Even in this water here, it talks about sustainability.
So this is really, no matter how they describe it, it's a fundamental transfer of sovereign power to the United Nations from each of the member countries in the United Nations to be exercised through control over land and other natural resources.
Like the gay rights movement before it, Karl Marx and the socialist movement have now come out of the closet naked and charging. The United States is immersed in an action plan that may have started out with some good intentions, but now subjects we the people to the threat of a Marxist world order.